In 1997, a young couple from Denver vanished without a trace during what was supposed to be a weekend trek in the Colorado Rockies. Their guide, a man with years of experience in the wilderness, was the last person to see them alive. He came down from the trail alone. His story never added up. And for over 25 years, the truth has remained buried beneath the ice, the trees, and the silence of the mountains. But sometimes, things don't stay buried forever, and when fragments resurface, they bring more questions than answers. Subscribe now if you're ready to uncover the truth hiding in the shadows of the Rockies. Because this story is one you won't forget. October 18, 1997. Rocky Mountain National Park. The trail was already iced over by late afternoon. Golden aspens clung stubbornly to their last leaves, trembling in the chill wind. In the valley, just visible from the ridge, Long's Peak pierced the horizon like a cathedral spire. At 4:12 p.m., 3 hikers signed the register at the Bear Lake trailhead. Daniel Reeve, 27, software consultant from Denver. Clara Bell, 26, art teacher, Denver. Samuel Harper, 41, licensed backcountry guide, Boulder. According to the record, they planned a weekend trek to a remote cirque called Blue Ash Basin, a rugged horseshoe of cliffs that funneled into a glacial lake. Harper, the guide, scrawled his signature with a confident flourish. Next to return date, he wrote, October 20th. They never returned. 2 days later, at dawn, Harper staggered into the ranger station at Estes Park. His beard was rimmed with frost, his gait unsteady. When rangers asked where his clients were, he collapsed onto the floor, whispering, "They didn't make it." Storm came in, slipped, both of them. But no bodies were ever recovered. No footprints were found in the snow where he claimed they fell. No scraps of gear, no torn clothing, no blood. Just silence. The official search spanned 8 days, involving dogs, helicopters, and more than 60 volunteers. Nothing. By November, the case was cold, filed under presumed fatalities. And yet, Harper never faced charges. Investigators couldn't prove he lied. The mountains are vast, unforgiving, capable of swallowing even the most careful hiker. His account, disjointed as it was, remained the only narrative. Daniel and Clara's families never believed it. They insisted their children were cautious, experienced, and in love with each other, not reckless thrill seekers. They pressed the police for years, begged the press to keep the story alive, even hired private investigators. Still nothing. For the next 2 decades, the case drifted into the gray zone of Colorado folklore, half tragedy, half rumor. People whispered about it in bars and ski lodges. That guide, he was off, you know? Heard he had debts. They ran away together. New lives. Happens, bodies are out there. Mountain doesn't give back what it takes. Then, in the spring of 2022, a trail crew clearing brush near Blue Ash Basin found something that changed everything. It was small, weather-worn, easily overlooked among the roots and stones. A camera. The kind sold in 1997 at drugstores. Disposable, plastic, wrapped in faded waterproof casing. The film was miraculously intact. And when developed, it revealed 6 photographs taken on that final trek. The first showed Daniel, his arm around Clara, smiling against a backdrop of golden aspens. The second, Clara by the lake, laughing as wind whipped her hair. The third, Harper, holding a trekking pole, his expression caught somewhere between amusement and irritation. The fourth, blurred trees, as if the camera swung wildly. The fifth, a shadowy figure behind Clara, face obscured, too close. The sixth, blank, overexposed, white. For the first time in 25 years, the story was cracked open. The case file was reopened, and a long-buried secret began clawing its way back to the surface. The first snow of the season had fallen 2 nights ago, but already the sidewalks of Estes Park were clear, salted by shop owners eager to keep foot traffic flowing into their businesses. A mountain town lived or died by its tourism, and autumn's end was always precarious. One day could bring leaf peepers with cameras slung around their necks, the next only empty streets and the sound of wind scraping shutters. Emma Clark pulled her scarf tighter as she crossed Elkhorn Avenue. She could see her breath in the air, each exhale a small plume of fog. The bookstore on the corner was her destination, a place called High Country Reads, where locals still pinned flyers about missing pets and yoga classes to the corkboard by the door. She wasn't here for books. She was here for a meeting. Inside, the smell of paper and roasted coffee mingled pleasantly. A few tourists browsed racks of Colorado trail guides. At the back table, a woman in her 60s sat waiting, her coat draped over the chair, a leather satchel at her feet. Her eyes, sharp, restless, lined with fatigue, found Emma instantly. "Mrs. Reeve?" Emma asked. The woman nodded. "Patricia, please, you must be Emma Clark." Emma extended her hand. Patricia's grip was firmer than expected, her skin cool. They sat. For a moment, the only sound was the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. Patricia tapped the satchel with her foot, almost protectively. "I brought it," she said finally. Emma leaned in. "The camera?" Patricia unbuckled the satchel and slid out a sealed evidence envelope. Inside, cushioned by bubble wrap, lay the disposable camera. The faded green and yellow Kodak casing cracked but intact. On the back, a ranger's handwriting in black Sharpie read, "Recovered April 12th, 2022. Blue Ash Basin Trail, Chain of Custody, RMNP." Emma felt a shiver run through her. She had seen the photos already, scanned by the sheriff's department and sent to her in low resolution. But seeing the physical object was different. This was the thing Daniel and Clara had touched on their last day alive. "They let you keep it?" she asked. Patricia's mouth tightened. "Only because I wouldn't leave without it. They've made copies, digital files, negatives, but this," she tapped the envelope, "this is theirs. My son's." My boy held this in his hand. Emma studied Patricia's face, seeing in it the erosion of 25 years of grief. Daniel had been 27 when he vanished. She herself was only 32 now. She tried to imagine losing someone at that age, waiting decades for closure, and failing. "They reopened the case because of this?" Emma said gently. Patricia gave a dry laugh. "Reopened. That's a polite word. They shuffled some papers, dug up a few old files. But what I want, what I need, is the truth. And that's why I called you." Emma had been reporting for Mountain Times for almost 7 years, covering everything from wildfires to water rights. But it was her series on cold cases, unsolved disappearances across Colorado, that had given her recognition. She wasn't police, she wasn't a detective, but she had time, persistence, and a way of asking questions that made people talk. She nodded. "Then let's start from the beginning. Tell me what you remember about that weekend." Patricia's eyes clouded, her gaze drifting past Emma to the window where a man scraped frost from his truck windshield. "I remember the phone call," she said finally. "October 20th. A ranger telling me my son hadn't come back from his hike, that his guide had returned alone." Her hand trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee. "I thought, foolishly maybe, they'd be found in hours. Maybe lost, maybe hurt, but found. You don't imagine, at first, that the mountain just swallows people." Emma let the silence sit before asking, "And Samuel Harper? Did you ever meet him?" Patricia's mouth tightened. "Once, at the ranger station. He looked me in the eye and said, 'I did everything I could.' But there was something off. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't even rattled. Just cold. Like he'd rehearsed the line. 'You think he lied. I know he lied.'" Patricia's voice hardened. "Daniel and Clara didn't just fall?" They were careful. Daniel had hiked those trails since college. And Harper. He had a record. Emma perked up. What kind of record? Patricia hesitated. Not criminal. Not that I know of. But debts. Gambling, I think. My husband heard things from a friend in Boulder. He was desperate for money. She looked at Emma sharply. And then, poof! 2 young people vanish, and he walks away clean. Don't tell me that's chance. Emma wrote a note in her leather journal. If he was in debt, motive could be money. But what would he gain? Patricia's eyes flicked to the camera between them. That's what you need to find out. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years pressing down. Outside, the wind gusted, scattering dry leaves across the sidewalk. Finally, Patricia slid the envelope back into her satchel. I've kept quiet for a long time, Miss Clark. But this chance, it might be the last one I get. Please, don't let them bury it again. Emma reached across the table, covering Patricia's hand with her own. I won't. That night, back in her cabin rental on the edge of town, Emma spread her notes across the table. The photographs lay at the center, printed from the sheriff's digital scans. She studied them again, though she had already memorized every detail. Photo 1. Daniel's smile. His arm draped around Clara, the yellow leaves framing them like a halo. Photo 2. Clara alone, carefree, her head tilted back in laughter. Photo 3. Harper, tall, broad-shouldered, his mouth caught mid-word. Something guarded in his eyes. Photo 4. Blurred trees, as if the camera swung during a stumble. Photo 5. The one that had fueled every theory since April. Clara in the foreground, unaware, and behind her, a dark figure, out of focus but unmistakably close. Too close. Photo 6. Blank, overexposed, as if the film had been seared by sudden light. Emma traced the 5th photo with her fingertip. Who had taken it? Daniel? But if so, why hadn't he warned Clara about the figure? And who was the figure? Harper, perhaps? Or someone else entirely? She flipped open her laptop and typed, Samuel Harper, Boulder, Colorado. The first results were sparse. A white-page directory listing, a property record for a small cabin outside Nederland, and, most intriguingly, a local newspaper article from 2010. Rescue guide Harper retires after 2 decades. The article praised Harper's career, leading countless hikes, assisting with mountain rescues, teaching survival courses. A photograph showed him older, grayer, but recognizably the same man from photo 3. The article called him a fixture of the backcountry community. No mention of Daniel and Clara. Not one word. Emma leaned back, unsettled. Harper hadn't vanished into obscurity. He had lived openly, even celebrated. How had suspicion never clung to him? Or had it, quietly, beneath the surface? She jotted down names from the article. Colleagues, friends, people quoted praising him. A list of potential interviews. The cabin creaked as wind rattled the eaves. The mountains outside her window were dark silhouettes, hulking against the night sky. Emma stared out at them, feeling the same chill she'd felt in Patricia's eyes earlier. The mountains kept their secrets well, but maybe, just maybe, it was time they started giving them up. The Nederland library smelled of dust and pine cleaner. Its stone walls had absorbed decades of mountain winters, giving the air a chill even when the wood stove glowed. Emma sat at a long oak table, surrounded by stacks of newspapers. The microfilm machine hummed beside her, projecting faintly grainy headlines onto the screen. She had driven down the twisting canyon road that morning, leaving Estes Park behind. The sun lit the jagged peaks in amber and silver, but she hardly noticed. Her mind was fixed on one name, Samuel Harper. The librarian, a woman in her 70s with silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, had pulled every regional newspaper she could find. He was a local figure, she'd said. There should be plenty. Then she'd left Emma alone with the archives, as if knowing some secrets were best uncovered in solitude. The earliest mention Emma found was from 1989. Local man saves lost hiker near Eldora. The article was short, praising Harper, then 33, for helping search and rescue locate a lost college student. His quote was earnest. Anyone would have done the same. The mountains give, the mountains take. You respect that Emma flipped forward through the years. Harper appeared again and again, sometimes leading charity treks, sometimes lecturing on avalanche safety, sometimes assisting in rescues. He was portrayed as dependable, rugged, a man of the wilderness. But Emma noticed something odd. Every few years there were gaps, months at a time when his name disappeared from the news. No rescues, no lectures, no quotes. Just silence. One such gap spanned the winter of 1997 to 1998, exactly when Daniel and Clara had vanished. Emma rubbed her temples. Coincidence or deliberate absence? She turned another page and froze. It was an editorial from 1998, unsigned, buried in the opinion section of the Boulder Daily Camera. While praise for our mountain guides is deserved, we must also question the lack of accountability when tragedies occur. Last fall, 2 young people disappeared under the supervision of a licensed guide. Despite unanswered questions, authorities have closed the case. Families deserve more. No names were printed, but Emma knew instantly what it referenced. She slid the clipping into her folder. By afternoon, she was parked outside the Miner's Rest, a tavern tucked into a bend of Netherlands' main street. The sign above the door leaned at an angle, the paint peeling, but inside it was warm and busy. Wood-paneled walls, neon beer signs, laughter echoing over the clatter of pool balls. Emma ordered a coffee at the bar. The bartender, a broad man with a beard streaked white, gave her a curious look. "You're not from around here." "No," Emma admitted. "I'm a reporter." He chuckled. "Thought so." Reporters always look like they're listening harder than drinking. Emma smiled faintly. "I'm working on a piece about old cases in the Rockies." "Do you remember a guide named Samuel Harper?" The man's expression shifted, guarded. "Sam. Course I remember. Everyone does. What kind of man was he?" The bartender leaned on the counter, wiping a glass. "Solid, quiet. Knew the trails like the back of his hand. You trusted him. You came back alive." Emma hesitated. "Except for once." The man's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about those kids." The Denver couple. Daniel Reeve and Clara Bell. He set down the glass with a thud. "Listen." That was a tragedy. But it wasn't on Sam. Storms roll in fast up there. I've seen clear skies turn to blizzards in an hour. You can do everything right and still get swallowed. Did you believe his story? The bartender's jaw tightened. For a moment, Emma thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly he said, "Belief doesn't bring the dead back. And stirring it up now won't change what happened." Before she could press, a man 2 stools down muttered, "Unless they weren't dead." Emma turned. The speaker was thin, weathered, his flannel shirt stained with grease. He sipped whiskey with a trembling hand. "What do you mean?" she asked. The man gave a humorless laugh. "Means Harper came down alone, and nobody ever found bodies. Means I hiked that basin a week later, and I swear I saw smoke from a fire where no one should have been. But the rangers said I was drunk." He tapped his glass. "Maybe I was. But smoke don't lie." The bartender scowled. "Shut it, Frank. Don't fill her head with ghost stories. Emma scribbled notes anyway. Could you show me where you saw the smoke?" Frank's eyes glinted. "If you're brave enough to hike there." That evening, Emma drove into the foothills, the road climbing in switchbacks. She found Harper's cabin easily, a squat structure of logs and stone perched on a ridge. The windows were dark. A for sale sign leaned against the porch rail, faded by sun and rain. She parked a distance away, listening. Only wind moved through the pines. Harper wasn't home, or perhaps he wasn't alive anymore. She made a note to check property records for his status. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The mountains loomed around her, silent, their slopes draped in shadows. Somewhere out there, a fire had burned in 1997. Somewhere, 2 young lives had ended, or changed forever. Emma started the engine and drove back toward town, headlights slicing through the dark. She didn't see the figure standing at the tree line, motionless until her car had already passed. The house wasn't much to look at. A low-slung rancher at the edge of Boulder's north side, its paint dulled by years of sun, its yard cluttered with rusting tools and a half-collapsed woodpile. A mailbox out front bore the name S. Harper in peeling letters. Emma sat in her car across the street, tapping her pen against her notebook. Through the windshield, she could see curtains drawn across the windows. A faint wisp of chimney smoke curled into the crisp November sky. He was home. Her pulse quickened. This was the man at the center of everything, Samuel Harper, the guide who had walked down from the mountains alone 25 years ago. She rehearsed her approach in her head. Straightforward, respectful, but firm. She had dealt with defensive subjects before. But this was different. This man wasn't just a source. He was the last living witness to a disappearance that still haunted 2 families. Finally, she opened the car door and stepped out. Gravel crunched beneath her boots. She crossed the street, heart pounding, and climbed the short path to the porch. She knocked. For a long moment, there was no sound. Then slow footsteps approached. The door creaked open. Samuel Harper stood framed in the doorway. He was 66 now. His once broad shoulders stooped, his hair a tangled mix of gray and white. His face was weathered like rock, lines etched deep around his mouth and eyes. But his gaze, sharp, unflinching, was exactly as it had been in the photograph from the old camera. Yes? His voice was gravelly, wary. "Mr. Harper?" Emma extended a hand. "My name is Emma Clark. I'm a journalist. I'd like to talk with you about Daniel Reeve and Clara Bell." For a heartbeat, she thought he might slam the door. His eyes narrowed, flicking from her hand to her face. "I said all I had to say 25 years ago. And yet," Emma replied softly, "their families still don't know what happened." The silence stretched. Harper's jaw tightened. Then, surprisingly, he stepped aside. "You'd better come in before the neighbors start gossiping." The interior smelled faintly of wood smoke and damp wool. The living room was cluttered with maps, dog-eared guidebooks, and faded photographs of mountains. A wood stove burned in the corner, crackling. "Sit," Harper said, gesturing to a worn armchair. He lowered himself onto the couch opposite, his movements stiff with age. Emma pulled out her notebook. "I appreciate your time." He gave a short laugh, humorless. "You're not the first reporter." "But most stopped coming after the 90s. Because the case went cold? Because there was nothing left to say." Emma studied him. "Then why did you let me in?" His eyes lingered on her face. "Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I'm tired of silence." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Go ahead. Ask your questions." She took a breath. "When Daniel and Clara vanished, you told rangers they slipped during a storm. Why wasn't there evidence? No tracks, no gear, nothing?" His gaze hardened. "Because the mountain covers its mistakes. Storm snow fills tracks in minutes. Rocks swallow packs. You city people think everything leaves a trace. Out there, sometimes nothing does." Emma held his stare. "But there were 6 photographs recovered this year. One shows a figure behind Clara. Too close. Was that you?" A flicker passed through his eyes, so quick she almost doubted she saw it. Then his expression flattened. "I don't know. Could have been me. I walked behind them sometimes, but you don't remember?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "It's been 25 years. Memories rot. Photographs lie, or reveal, Emma countered. Silence. The wood stove popped, sending sparks against the grate. At last, Harper said, "You're digging in graves better left closed. That family's been through enough." "So is yours," Emma said softly. "If you're innocent, wouldn't you want the truth out?" His mouth twitched. For the first time, his voice cracked with something like pain. "Innocent doesn't matter in the mountains. You take people in, you try to bring them back. Sometimes you fail. That failure sticks to you like pitch. You don't wash it off." Emma studied him. Was this guilt or confession? "Tell me about that storm," she pressed. He closed his eyes briefly, as if seeing it. Clouds rolled over the ridge by mid-afternoon. Snow coming sideways, wind screaming like a freight train. They panicked, slipped near the Basin rim. I tried, God help me, I tried, but they were gone. White swallowed them whole. "And you didn't climb down?" His eyes snapped open, sharp. "Would you?" "Into a death chute. Blind, with a blizzard at your back. I'd have died too. Then there'd be 3 bodies instead of 2," Emma scribbled notes. But something gnawed at her. His words had weight, but also a rehearsed cadence, as if he'd spoken this defense countless times. She tried another angle. "Where were you the week after?" "Witnesses say you disappeared from town." His jaw clenched. "I needed time. Alone. You wouldn't understand. Try me." But Harper rose abruptly, ending the conversation. "That's enough. You've had your story. Now leave me be." Emma stood reluctantly, pocketing her notebook. "One last thing, Mr. Harper." He paused, hand on the door. "If you didn't hurt them, who did?" His expression darkened, unreadable. "Sometimes the mountain itself is the third person." He opened the door, and cold air rushed in. Emma stepped out, unsettled. As she walked to her car, she glanced back. Harper still stood in the doorway, watching, his face half shadowed by the flicker of the wood stove. Back at her motel, Emma reviewed her notes. Harper had given nothing concrete, yet everything about him screamed withholding. His defensiveness, his sudden anger, his evasions around the missing week. She opened her laptop and dug into public records. Property filings showed he still owned the Nederland cabin until last year, when he sold it for a fraction of market value. Bank records, what little she could trace, revealed debts stretching back decades, some tied to gambling establishments in Black Hawk. And then one entry caught her breath. In 1998, 6 months after Daniel and Clara's disappearance, Harper had wired a large sum of money, $15,000, to an unknown recipient in Wyoming. The note field simply read, "Settlement." Emma's hands trembled on the keyboard. Settlement with who and why? Her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Reeve. "Did you meet him?" Emma typed back. "Yes, he's hiding something. I'm sure of it." A pause. Then Patricia replied, "Then dig deeper. Don't stop now." Emma stared at the message. Outside her window, the mountains loomed dark and silent. Somewhere beneath that silence, the truth was buried, waiting. The highway stretched endlessly before her, a ribbon of asphalt vanishing into pale November light. Emma's rental car hummed against the frozen pavement, the dashboard clock ticking toward dusk. She had been driving north for 4 hours, chasing a lead that might unravel or explode into something far more dangerous. Wyoming lay open and austere. Snow clung in wind-sculpted drifts along the shoulders. Cattle grazed against fences buried to their bellies. The radio had faded into static miles ago. Only the low growl of the engine and her own thoughts filled the cabin. The wire transfer record gnawed at her. Harper wiring $15,000 to an unknown recipient less than a year after the disappearance. The note, "Settlement," was too deliberate, too final. Settling what, and with whom? Public records had given her a name, Elden Graves, resident of a town so small it barely existed on the map. No phone listing, no digital footprint. Just a P.O. box that had once received the payment. Emma glanced at the paper on the passenger seat. Elden Graves, age then 39, now 64. A rancher's son, briefly arrested in the late 70s for assault, but never convicted. A man whose life seemed to dissolve into obscurity after that. She tightened her grip on the wheel. Why would Harper pay him? The sun dipped low, turning the plains to molten gold. Emma followed a dirt road flanked by skeletal cottonwoods until it ended at a battered farmhouse leaning against the wind. A single porch light flickered. She parked, heart pounding, and stepped out into the brittle air. Gravel crunched under her boots. Her breath smoked white. The door opened before she knocked. An old man stood there, gaunt and hollow-eyed, his skin tanned and cracked like leather. He wore a flannel shirt buttoned tight, sleeves rolled to reveal wiry arms. His gaze settled on Emma with a suspicion that cut deeper than words. "You're not from around here." "My name is Emma Clark. I'm a journalist." She held up her press badge. "I'm looking into Samuel Harper." At the name, the man's face hardened. He started to close the door. Emma spoke quickly. "Mr. Graves, Elden, you received a wire transfer from him in 1998. $15,000. I need to know why." The door froze halfway shut. Elden's jaw worked. Then slowly, he reopened it. "Come in, quick. Don't stand out there like bait." The interior smelled of tobacco and old dust. A wood stove glowed faintly in the corner. Emma sat at a scarred kitchen table while Elden poured 2 chipped mugs of coffee. His hands trembled as he set one before her. "You shouldn't have come," he muttered. "Why not?" "Because Harper's still alive." His eyes lifted, sharp and fearful. "And if he knows you're here, he'll come." Emma leaned forward. "Then tell me what happened. Why did he pay you?" Elden stared into his coffee. When he spoke, his voice was low, raw. "I was up in the high basin that week. Hunting elk, off-season, I'll admit it. Storm rolled in. Nasty one. White out. I got turned around and ended up near a scree slope. That's when I saw him." Emma's pulse quickened. "Harper?" Elden nodded. "He was dragging something. A pack, maybe, or—" He broke off, swallowed. "No, it was a body, wrapped in canvas." Emma gripped her mug, heat searing her palms. "A body? Male or female?" "I couldn't tell." He saw me watching, dropped it like it weighed nothing, and came straight at me. Elden's eyes glazed, remembering. I had my rifle. He had nothing but an ice axe. Still, I froze. He got right up in my face, breathing hard, snow plastered in his beard. He said if I opened my mouth, no one would ever find my bones either. Emma's throat tightened. And the money. Months later, envelope at the post office. Note said, "For your silence." I didn't spend it. Not a dime. Blood money. He shuddered. Buried it out back. The kitchen seemed to shrink around them. Emma's pen hovered above her notebook, shaking. "Why didn't you tell the police?" she asked. Elden's laugh was bitter. Who'd believe me? A poacher with a record, saying the mountain guide was hauling corpses? They'd have locked me up before him. Emma tried to steady her breathing. If Elden was telling the truth, everything changed. Harper hadn't just lost the couple to a storm. He had disposed of them. But why? "Do you know who it was?" she pressed. Elden's gaze darted to the window, as though the wind itself might carry Harper's name. Could have been either. Or both. All I know is, what he dragged didn't move. Silence weighed heavy. Outside, the wind rattled loose siding. Emma whispered, "You're afraid of him still." Elden's jaw tightened. A man like Harper doesn't let go. He carries death the way other men carry packs, always ready to drop it where it suits him. She closed her notebook. "Elden, will you go on record?" His eyes widened. "Hell no. You print my name. I'm dead before morning. You want to chase this story? Fine, but leave me out." Emma felt the ground tilt beneath her. If she couldn't sight him, this revelation was smoke, not fire. Yet the terror in his eyes was more convincing than any signature. She stood, slipping the notebook into her bag. "Thank you for telling me. I won't forget it." Elden walked her to the door, but before she stepped into the night, he gripped her arm. His hand was calloused, desperate. "Be careful, Miss Clark. You think you're hunting truth, but the truth you're poking has teeth, and it's hungry." The drive back south was a blur. Headlights carved tunnels through the dark plains. Emma's mind churned with Elden's words. A body, canvas wrapped, Harper coming at him with an axe. If true, it was the closest thing to evidence she had found. Yet without Elden's testimony on record, it remained a ghost story. Near midnight, she pulled into a roadside motel. The neon sign buzzed above the office, casting sickly green light. She checked in, locked the door twice, and collapsed onto the bed fully dressed. But sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Harper's face in the wood stove light, and Elden's trembling hands describing canvas dragging across snow. At 3 a.m., Emma sat upright, heart racing. A sound outside, a crunch of gravel. She crept to the window, pulled back the curtain an inch. A truck idled in the lot. Old, battered, its headlights off. She couldn't see the driver. After a moment, it pulled away, taillights vanishing into darkness. Emma's breath came fast. Coincidence or warning? She returned to the bed, clutching her notebook to her chest. Whatever this was, she was in it now. And someone else knew it too. The mountains rose into view again by late afternoon, their jagged ridges dusted white against a pale sky. Emma gripped the steering wheel tighter as her rental car wound along the highway back toward Boulder. Wyoming lay behind her like a fever dream, but Elden Graves' words clung to her ribs like ice. He was dragging something, wrapped in canvas. Emma had heard stories before, rumors, confessions, theories whispered in dim bars, but never with such sharp edges of fear. Elden had looked at her like a man still hunted, and maybe he was. By the time she reached her motel, she was exhausted. She showered quickly, letting the hot water beat down on her stiff shoulders, and collapsed into bed. But sleep brought no rest. In her dreams, the storm swallowed everything: Daniel, Clara, canvas dragging across snow, and Harper's hollow eyes watching from the ridge. She woke at dawn to her phone buzzing. A message from Patricia Reeve. "Did you find anything?" Emma hesitated, then typed back, "Yes, but not something I can print yet. Need more." Patricia's reply came almost instantly. "Then keep digging. Don't let him bury them again." The next day, Emma drove to the public records office in Boulder. The building was warm and fluorescent lit, filled with the faint smell of paper and toner. She requested archived sheriff's reports from October 1995, the weeks surrounding Daniel and Clara's disappearance. A clerk wheeled out a stack of boxes. Emma settled at a table, flipping through brittle files and faded Polaroids. Most of it she knew. Initial search logs, storm reports, witness interviews. But then she found a thin folder labeled Harper, Samuel, Statement of Movements, Post-Disappearance. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. The official report said Harper returned from the storm on October 14th, exhausted and frostbitten. He spent 2 nights at a lodge in Nederland, then assisted rangers in search efforts until October 21st. But tucked inside the file was a handwritten note, unsigned, dated October 20th. Harper absent from search between October 15th to 18th. Claimed illness. No witness to verify. Returned suddenly on the 19th. Said he had been at cabin. Inconsistent story. Request clarification. Emma froze. The missing week. Exactly what Elden had hinted at. She flipped through more pages. Nothing further explained the absence. The request for clarification had never been followed up. Why? She checked the bottom of the folder. A name scrawled in faded ink. Deputy Carl Larkin. Retired now, according to a quick search, living in Estes Park. Emma's heart kicked. A living witness. Someone who had doubted Harper at the time. She packed up her notes and headed for the door. The drive to Estes Park wound through canyons and pine forests, switchbacks clinging to cliffs. By the time Emma pulled into town, the sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows across the valley. Carl Larkin lived in a modest bungalow on a quiet street. His yard was neatly kept, bird feeders hanging from the eaves. Emma knocked, nerves tightening in her chest. An old man answered, late 70s, hair white and thinning, his face lined but his eyes alert. Yes, Mr. Larkin, my name is Emma Clark. I'm a journalist. I'm researching the 1995 disappearance of Daniel Reeve and Clara Bell. At the names, his expression flickered. That was a long time ago. I know, but I found your note in the records about Harper's missing days. I was hoping you could tell me more. He studied her, weighing. Then he sighed and opened the door. Come in. I was wondering when someone would finally ask. The house smelled of wood polish and tea. Photographs of mountains and grandchildren lined the walls. Larkin led her to the kitchen table, poured 2 mugs of tea, and sat heavily. I was a deputy then, he began. Not much rank, but I paid attention. Harper came down from the storm alone, said the couple vanished. We launched the search, but 3 days later, he vanished too. Just stopped showing up, Emma leaned forward. And when he returned, Larkin's jaw tightened. Said he'd been sick. Flu. But no one had seen him in town. No doctor, no clerk at the store, no lodgekeeper. He'd been somewhere else. Did you push him on it? I tried. Wrote the request for clarification you found. But the sheriff at the time, Harlan Boon, told me to drop it. Said Harper was traumatized, that pressing him would scare him off. I didn't buy it, but Boon had connections. He trusted Harper, Emma scribbled furiously. Connections! Guides, climbers, donors. Harper had a reputation. Tough, reliable, the man you wanted on a rope line. Folks didn't want to believe he'd done anything wrong. Larkin's gaze drifted toward the window, voice growing softer. But I never forgot his face when he came back on the 19th. Pale, drawn, like a man who'd carried something heavy. Not illness. Something else. Emma's skin prickled. Do you think he killed them? Larkin hesitated. I think he knows more than he ever said. And I think Boon shut the door before we could pry it open. Silence settled. Outside, a crow cawed from a pine tree. Finally, Larkin leaned closer. If you're serious about this, talk to Boon. He's retired too, lives in Lyons. But watch yourself. Boon protects Harper like kin. He won't appreciate you stirring up ghosts. Emma closed her notebook. Thank you. I'll find him. As she left, Larkin called after her. Miss Clark, sometimes the dead aren't the only ones who want to stay buried. That night, back in her motel, Emma spread her notes across the bed. Elden had seen Harper dragging a body. Larkin confirmed Harper disappeared for days with no explanation. Boon had silenced the investigation. 3 threads, all pointing to the same dark knot. Emma rubbed her temples. She felt the case tightening like a noose, not just around Harper, but around herself. The truck outside her motel in Wyoming came back to her in a rush of dread. She glanced at the window, curtains drawn tight. For the first time, she wondered if Harper knew she was digging into him. And if he did, what would he do next? Lyons sat at the mouth of the canyon like a stubborn outpost, its brick storefronts and diners glowing against the shadow of the cliffs. Emma parked outside a small house with a sagging porch and a flagpole planted in the yard. The name on the mailbox confirmed it. Harlan Boon. She sat for a moment, steadying her breath. Boon was the wall she had read about in the files, the one who had silenced Larkin's doubts. A man whose voice had once carried the weight of a badge. If anyone had pulled strings for Harper, it was him. Emma walked up the steps and knocked. The door opened to reveal a broad-shouldered man in his late 70s, hair white but still thick, his frame only slightly softened by age. He wore a plaid shirt tucked neatly into jeans, a sheriff's ring still gleaming on his right hand. His eyes were pale and steady, assessing her the way lawmen always did. "Mr. Boon?" "That's me." His voice was gravelly but confident. "What can I do for you?" Emma showed her press badge. "My name is Emma Clark. I'm a journalist looking into the 1995 disappearance of Daniel Reeve and Clara Bell." The name landed like a pebble in a pond. Boon's face barely shifted, but his hand tightened on the door frame. "That case is long closed," he said. "Closed, but not solved. Their families still don't have answers. I was hoping you could help me understand why Samuel Harper was never pressed on his missing days during the search." A pause. Then Boon stepped aside. "Come in." The living room was immaculate. Walls lined with plaques and framed photographs. Boon in uniform, shaking hands with governors, standing beside search and rescue teams, posing in front of patrol cars. A mantel above the fireplace displayed medals and a folded flag. "Have a seat," Boon said, gesturing to a leather armchair. He lowered himself into the couch opposite, moving with the ease of someone still proud of his body despite age. Emma opened her notebook. "Thank you. I'll be direct. Deputy Carl Larkin noted Harper was absent for several days. He wrote a request for clarification. Why was it never followed up?" Boon's eyes flicked, almost amused. Larkin was a good man, but he saw ghosts where there weren't any. Harper came back from that storm, frostbitten and half-starved. He'd lost 2 hikers. I wasn't about to hound him when he could barely stand. But he vanished for 3 days, no witnesses. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Boon leaned back, folding his arms. "You ever been through a mountain storm, Miss Clark?" Men lose time. Wanderhole up in cabins. Half the county's filled with old miners' shacks. He said he was sick. That was enough for me. Emma studied him. Or maybe it was easier not to ask questions. For the first time, Boon's smile thinned. "Careful. I'm only trying to understand why his story was never scrutinized." "Because I knew Harper," Boon snapped, then caught himself. He took a breath, smoothing his tone. "I knew his father before him. Guides, both of them. Salt of the earth. You don't throw a man like that to the wolves without cause." Emma leaned forward. "What about cause like dragging a body?" "I spoke to someone who saw him." The air in the room shifted. Boon's eyes narrowed, sharp as a hawk's. "You need to watch what stories you swallow. This county has long memories, but not all of them are true." Emma's pen scratched against paper. "So you deny Harper hid something?" Boon's voice dropped. "I'm saying you're digging in ground that doesn't want to be dug. The Reeves and Bells have suffered enough. You keep stirring this, you'll hurt more people than you help." Emma met his gaze. "Or I'll finally bring them closure." They sat in silence, the crackle of the fireplace filling the space. Finally, Boon rose, signaling the conversation was over. "I've said my piece. Harper isn't your villain. The mountain took those kids. That's the only truth that matters." Emma closed her notebook and stood. "Thank you for your time." He escorted her to the door. As she stepped outside, Boon's voice followed, low and deliberate. "Miss Clark, if I were you, I'd stop now. Some truths aren't meant to come back down the canyon." The door shut behind her with a final click. Emma sat in her car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Boon hadn't admitted anything. But his defensiveness, his loyalty to Harper, the thinly veiled warning, those spoke louder than words. She drove back toward Boulder as night fell, headlights sweeping across canyon walls. At one bend, she caught sight of a truck in her rear-view mirror. Old, dented, its headlights staying far back but steady. Her stomach clenched. She pushed the accelerator. The truck stayed with her, mile after mile, through narrow turns and dark tunnels. Finally, near a turnout, she pulled over abruptly, pretending to check her phone. The truck roared past, tail lights vanishing around the bend. Emma exhaled shakily. Coincidence, maybe. Or a reminder. Back in Boulder, she typed furiously into her laptop, piecing notes together. Harper's missing week, Elden's sighting, Boon's protection. 3 lives vanished in the snow, and yet the weight of silence pressed heavier than any storm. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaustion tugging at her. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw Harper's face again, staring from the glow of the wood stove, expression unreadable. And for the first time, she wondered not just what he had done, but who had stood beside him when he did it. The next morning, the mountains wore a different face. A storm had rolled in overnight, draping the peaks in a shroud of gray. Snow drifted across the highway, flakes clinging to Emma's windshield as she steered toward Harper's house. Her stomach tightened with every mile. Boon's words still rang in her ears. Some truths aren't meant to come back down the canyon. But Boon's warning had only hardened her resolve. If Harper was hiding something, it was time to see if the mask could break. She pulled up to the sagging rancher on the north side of Boulder. Smoke rose from the chimney. The truck in the driveway was the same one she had glimpsed shadowing her on the canyon road the night before. Her chest went cold. She got out anyway, boots crunching in fresh snow, and knocked. The door opened slower this time. Harper stood there, eyes bloodshot, lines deeper in his face. He didn't look surprised. "You again?" "Yes, I need more answers." His jaw worked. Then, with a weary motion, he stepped aside. "Come in, then. Let's get this over with." The room was as she remembered. Maps, guidebooks, photographs of mountains, the wood stove crackling. But the air felt heavier, tinged with something sour beneath the smoke. Emma sat. Harper stayed standing, looming by the window, staring out at the storm. "You talked to Boon," he said flatly. Emma didn't flinch. "I did. He said you vanished for 3 days after the storm. Where were you?" Harper's back stiffened. "I was sick." Larkin said there were no witnesses. "No doctor, no lodgekeeper. You were gone." He turned, eyes narrowing. "You think I killed them?" Emma's pulse hammered. "I think you know more than you've said, and I think someone saw you dragging a body that week." Silence crashed between them. The only sound was the hiss of logs breaking in the fire. Harper's face paled. "Who told you that?" Emma held his gaze. "Does it matter?" His breath came sharp, ragged. For a moment, his composure faltered, eyes darting like a cornered animal's. Then he clenched his fists, forcing steel back into his voice. "That man's a liar." "So you admit there was a man?" "No." His shout cracked the air. Then he lowered his voice, almost pleading. "You don't understand what the mountain does. It plays tricks, makes you see what you want to see." Emma leaned forward, her words deliberate. "What did it make you see, Harper?" For the first time, something in him cracked. His shoulders sagged. He sat heavily in the chair opposite, elbows on knees, face buried in his hands. "I tried to save them," he muttered. "I swear to God I tried." The storm came down, fast, like a wall. Daniel slipped first. Clara screamed. "I grabbed her, but she pulled me down. His voice broke. "I cut the rope." Emma's breath caught. "You cut them loose?" "They were pulling me over. I had no choice. If I went, we all died. I cut, and they fell." He sat shaking, hands trembling. Emma's pen hovered. "Then where are the bodies?" His head lifted slowly. His eyes were hollow. "That's the mountain's secret. It swallows what it wants." Emma leaned closer, voice hard. "But someone saw you dragging a canvas-wrapped body days later." "What were you carrying?" Harper's face tightened, anguish twisting into fury. "Don't!" Don't push where you don't belong, Emma's pulse thundered. She pressed anyway. Was it Daniel? Clara? Or both? His chair scraped violently against the floor as he surged to his feet. Get out! Emma rose too, heart pounding. If you want me gone, tell me the truth. For a moment, she thought he might strike her. His hands clenched, his body taut as wire. Then, with a guttural sound, he turned and slammed his fist into the wall instead. Plaster cracked under his knuckles. He stood there, chest heaving, blood dripping from his hand. Emma's voice trembled but held. You've carried this for 25 years. Doesn't it eat you alive? His head bowed. A whisper escaped his lips. Every damn night. Emma's breath caught. It wasn't an admission, but it wasn't a denial either. She backed toward the door. Harper didn't stop her. He stood frozen, blood streaking his knuckles, eyes fixed on the fire like it held something only he could see. The storm thickened as Emma drove away. Snow lashed against the windshield, blurring the world into white. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Harper's words echoed. I cut the rope. It was survival. It was betrayal. It was both. But it still didn't explain Elden's sighting, or the missing days, or the settlement. She pulled into a diner on the edge of town, hands too shaky to drive further. Inside, the air was warm, the smell of fried food grounding her. She slid into a booth, ordered coffee, and opened her notebook. Harper admitted to cutting the rope. Still denies moving bodies. Boon protecting him. Settlement unexplained. Emma rubbed her eyes. She felt closer and further all at once. A shadow fell across the booth. She looked up. A man stood there, lean, mid-40s, wearing a flannel jacket. His eyes were steady, unreadable. You're Clark, he said. Her heart thudded. Yes. He slid into the booth across from her without asking. You need to stop asking about Harper. Emma's blood ran cold. Who are you? Just someone who knows the mountains don't give up their dead. He leaned closer, voice low. And neither do the men who walk them. Before she could speak, he rose and walked out, the bell above the door jingling. Emma sat frozen, coffee cooling in her hands. The storm outside howled louder. And for the first time, she wondered if the danger wasn't just Harper, but something larger, darker, wrapped around him like the snow on the peaks. The library in Denver was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that hummed with fluorescent lights and turning pages. Emma sat at a table surrounded by cardboard boxes. Patricia Reeve had called her that morning, voice taut with urgency. Clara's sister found something, she'd said. It's time you saw it. Now, in the stillness of the archives room, Emma opened the box. Inside lay a worn leather journal, its strap frayed, pages yellowed with age. A tag from the Reeve family lawyer marked it. Recovered from Clara Bell's belongings, October 1997. Returned to family 2022. Emma's hands trembled as she untied the strap and opened the cover. The first page bore Clara's looping handwriting, August 1997. Daniel says this trip will be our reset. He's been buried in work. I've been buried in lesson plans. We need the mountains. He says they'll remind us who we are. I hope he's right. Emma's chest tightened. A reset. Not just a romantic trick, but a patch for something frayed. She turned the pages slowly. Clara's words spilled in ink, alive with small details. Sketches of wildflowers, notes on books she wanted to read, scraps of overheard conversations. But as September turned to October, the tone shifted. October 2nd. Daniel insists on hiring a guide, says it will be safer. I don't disagree, but I hate the idea of a stranger on our trip. This was supposed to be ours. October 5th. Met Harper today. He's taller than I imagined. Quiet. His eyes make me uneasy. Daniel says I'm being unfair. But when Harper shook my hand, it felt like he was taking something from me, not giving. Emma's throat tightened. Clara had sensed something. She flipped further. October 12th, leaving tomorrow. The air feels sharp, like the mountain is waiting. Harper came by to check our gear. He stood in our kitchen looking at our photographs. I caught him staring at one of me and Daniel from last summer. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. I wanted to tell Daniel, but I didn't want to start a fight. He thinks I'm paranoid. Emma's pulse raced. Clara's words bled suspicion into the paper, a seed of dread planted before they even stepped on the trail. The final entry stopped her cold. October 13th, Bear Lake Trailhead. Sun bright, sky clear. Daniel's excited. Harper says the storm won't hit until tomorrow, but the wind feels wrong already. Last night I dreamed of falling forever, snow in my mouth. I woke and Harper was watching me. Just watching. Daniel slept beside me, unaware. I don't know what to do with this feeling. Maybe the mountain is trying to warn me. Emma closed the diary, heart hammering. Clara had left breadcrumbs, a record of unease, a sense of being observed. Patricia, seated across the table, watched her. She felt it, didn't she? Emma nodded. She did. She knew something was off. Patricia's hands tightened on her lap. I begged the police to look at this in '97. They dismissed it as nerves, imagination, said young women get jumpy before big trips. But I knew Emma's jaw tightened. They ignored her voice. Patricia's eyes glistened. Don't you ignore it too? That night, Emma returned to her motel room and spread the diary beside the photographs. Clara laughing by the lake. Clara unaware of the figure behind her. Clara writing that Harper's eyes unnerved her. The pieces began to align. This wasn't just a tragedy swallowed by a storm. This was a slow tightening spiral. Distrust, fear, a guide whose presence pressed against the couple's bond. Emma pulled out her recorder and began speaking into it, her voice low, steady. Clara Bell anticipated danger. Her entries show distrust toward Harper before the trek even began. If she feared him, if she felt watched, then the disappearance was not a simple accident. It was escalation. The rope cutting may have been survival, but the days after suggest concealment. And concealment implies intent. She stopped, rewound, listened. The words chilled her even as she spoke them. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging, Clark. Mountains keep their secrets for a reason. Emma's blood went cold. She snapped the curtains shut, heart pounding. For a moment, she thought she saw headlights flicker outside. Then nothing, just darkness pressing against the glass. She sat back on the bed, diary clutched to her chest, the message burning in her mind. Harper wasn't alone in this. Someone else was watching her now. The next morning, Emma drove to Boulder again, journal in her bag. She walked into the university archives, seeking corroboration. Old ranger logs, guide registries, accident reports. Anything. At a corner table, she found a brittle sheet listing backcountry permits for October 1997. She scanned quickly. Reeve, Daniel, Bell, Clara, Harper, Samuel. And beneath them, faint but legible. Graves, Elden. Bear Lake Trailhead, October 12th. Emma's breath caught. Elden hadn't been a random hunter stumbling into the storm. He had registered at the same trailhead, the same day. Why had he lied about being there illegally? Her mind raced. If he had reason to hide his presence, then his story wasn't the whole truth. And if Harper paid him, maybe it wasn't just for silence. Maybe it was for something darker. Emma sat frozen, the diary open beside her, the permit sheet trembling in her hands. Clara had written of being watched. Elden had admitted to watching Harper. But what if he had been watching Clara too? The snow outside thickened, tapping against the tall windows. Emma's reflection stared back from the glass, pale, shaken. For the first time, she wondered if the guide wasn't the only predator on that mountain. The plains stretched flat and endless, the highway cutting through them like a scar. Emma gripped the wheel tighter, the permit sheet on the passenger seat fluttering every time the heater kicked on. Graves, Elden, Bear Lake Trailhead. October 12th, 1997. Her pulse still hadn't settled. Elden had told her he'd been poaching elk illegally, terrified of being caught. But his name had been right there in black ink. He hadn't stumbled into that storm by accident. He'd chosen the same starting point, the same day. And if he had lied about that, what else had he lied about? The farmhouse loomed ahead, bent against the wind, its porch light already glowing faintly, though the afternoon sun still lingered. Emma parked, slammed the door harder than she meant to, and strode up the path. The door opened before she knocked. Elden's hollow eyes blinked at her in surprise. "You again," he muttered. "You lied to me." Her voice shook with restrained fury. His mouth worked silently. "What?" "You told me you were up there poaching, hiding from rangers. But I found the permit log." "Your name? October 12th. You registered at the trailhead just like they did." She pulled the paper from her coat and thrust it at him. "So tell me, Elden, why?" He stared at the sheet, color draining from his face. Emma stepped closer. "You weren't some unlucky hunter. You planned to be there, at the same time as Harper, at the same time as Daniel and Clara. Why?" Elden's hands trembled. He backed into the house, motioning her inside quickly. "Don't shout it out here. Walls have ears." The kitchen was colder than before, the stove unlit. Elden sat heavily at the table, rubbing his temples. "I didn't mean to lie," he rasped. "Not all of it. I had a permit." "Yes, but I wasn't supposed to be where I ended up. Blue Ash Basin's off trail without a guide. I knew Harper was taking them in. I thought if I shadowed them, stayed behind, I could slip in unnoticed." Emma's stomach twisted. "Why? What were you really doing up there?" Elden's eyes lifted, glistening with something between shame and defiance. "Because Harper owed me. Money, favors. We went back years. Cards, bets, ugly nights in Black Hawk. He promised to pay, but he didn't. So I followed him. Thought I'd corner him out there, away from town. Thought he'd have no choice but to settle." Emma's hand froze on her notebook. "You were extorting him." Elden's silence was answer enough. "And Daniel and Clara," she pressed. "They just happened to be there?" He nodded slowly. Wasn't supposed to involve them. They were just his clients. Young, loud, in love. I kept my distance. Until the storm hit. Emma's voice hardened. "And that's when you say you saw him dragging a body?" Elden's jaw clenched. "I did. Or you wanted me to believe you did." To pin it all on him, his fist struck the table, rattling the mugs. "No, I'm no saint, but I didn't touch those kids. I swear it on my mother's grave. Whatever Harper did or didn't, he did it without me." Emma's breath came fast, her notes shaking in her hand. Elden's story bent in circles, parts aligning, parts crumbling. The permit explained why Harper would pay him off, but it also made him complicit. She stared at him, searching his face. Then why keep lying? Why bury the truth for 25 years? His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because Harper wasn't alone that night." Emma froze. "What do you mean?" "There was someone else. Another man. I saw him in the blizzard, a lantern cutting through the snow. He met Harper near the Basin. They spoke, but the wind carried their words away. When they parted, Harper was dragging something. That's all I know." Emma's heart thudded. Another man. A fourth presence. "Who?" she demanded. Elden's eyes closed. "Didn't know him. Never saw his face. But I'll never forget the lantern." Yellow glass, cracked on one side, light flickering like it was about to die. Silence filled the kitchen, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Emma whispered, "Why didn't you tell me this before?" His voice cracked. Because Harper paid me to shut up, and because I'm a coward. I thought maybe I could keep it buried, but you're dragging it all back. Emma stood abruptly, notebook clutched to her chest. This isn't just Harper anymore. If there was another man, then both families deserve to know. Elden's eyes were wide, almost pleading. If you tell anyone, he'll know. The man with the lantern. If he's still alive, he'll come for you too. Emma turned toward the door. Then let him. I'm not burying this again. The wind howled as she drove away, the farmhouse shrinking in her rearview mirror. Her hands gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles ached. Another man. A lantern. A shadow threading through the storm 25 years ago. She pulled into a gas station, heart still racing. Inside, she bought a cup of coffee and sat in the car, staring at her notes. The narrative was fracturing. Harper Elden. Boon. And now a faceless man with a lantern. She sipped the coffee, bitter and too hot, grounding herself. Somewhere, Clara's diary sat in her bag, her words whispering. He was watching me. Just watching. Was it Harper? Or was it the man with the lantern? Emma closed her eyes, exhaustion tugging at her bones. But sleep would not come. Not while the storm of questions whirled inside her. For the first time, she realized the truth might not be a single thread. It might be a knot so tangled that pulling it free would unravel everything. Late that night, back in her motel, Emma replayed the day's conversations into her recorder. Elden Graves admits he followed Harper deliberately, seeking money. He claims he saw Harper dragging a body, but also that another man was present. A man with a lantern. If true, this introduces a fourth presence in the basin that night, one not accounted for in any report. She paused, the silence in the room pressing hard. If that man exists, then the disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was a convergence. A storm outside and another storm inside. Secrets colliding on the trail. And maybe only one of those storms has ended. She clicked off the recorder. The room felt colder, the shadows thicker. She pulled the curtains tighter. Outside, across the empty parking lot, a single light flickered in the darkness. Yellow. Cracked. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Morning broke in pale streaks of gray over the motel. Emma hadn't really slept. Her dreams kept replaying that flickering yellow light outside her window. When she finally mustered the courage to peek through the curtains, the parking lot had been empty, silent except for the hum of the vending machine. But the image clung to her. A cracked yellow lantern, glowing faintly against the dark. She packed quickly, her hands shaking as she shoved the recorder and Clara's diary into her bag. There was no time for breakfast. She needed answers before fear ate her alive. The county archive was little more than a brick annex behind the courthouse, dusty and underfunded. Inside, the smell of paper and mildew hung thick. Emma introduced herself to the clerk, a soft-spoken woman with bifocals who led her to the ranger reports from 1997. She pulled the box closer, dust motes rising as she lifted the lid. Pages browned with age rustled beneath her fingers. She scanned for October. Storm reports, rescue efforts, lists of volunteers. Then, her pulse jumped. Incident report, October 13th, 1997. Ranger D. McCrae. Patrol observed unknown male near Willow Fork, carrying lantern. Lantern described as yellow glass, cracked on east-facing panel. Male appeared disoriented, refused to identify himself. When approached, he retreated into woods. Not located again. Emma pressed her palm to the page, her breath shaky. The man existed. He wasn't Elden's invention. A ranger had seen him. She flipped further. Nothing more. No follow-up, no name, no conclusion. Just a single sighting swallowed by the storm. Her phone buzzed. A text from Boon. Found something you should see. Old gear and evidence locker. Harper's pack. Meet me at station 2 p.m. Emma closed the file, her fingers trembling. By the time she reached the station, Boon was waiting in the basement evidence room. He looked weary but sharper than before, a man who'd shed his earlier reluctance. On the table lay a dust-coated backpack, its strap stiff with age. A tag read, "Recovered, Bear Lake Trailhead, April 1998. Owner, Harper Cole." Boon gestured for her to open it. Emma hesitated, then unzipped slowly. Inside lay a coil of rope, waterlogged maps, a compass crusted with rust. But at the bottom, wrapped in plastic, was a small metal object. She lifted it gently. A lantern handle, bent and corroded. Her chest tightened. The glass was gone, but one jagged shard remained, tinged faintly yellow. Boon's voice was low. Noticed it when reorganizing. Never logged properly. Just shoved into the pack. Emma swallowed hard. So Harper had the lantern? Or took it from the man who did? Their eyes met. Neither spoke, the thought hanging heavy between them. If Harper had that lantern, then Elden's sighting wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of one more buried. That night, Emma sat in her motel room, Clara's diary open on the bed. She read the entries again, searching for patterns. October 10th. Harper keeps watching me. Smiles like he knows a secret. October 11th. Strange noise outside tent. Daniel said wind, but I don't think so. October 12th. Someone else. I heard footsteps circling. Not Harper this time. He was asleep. Emma's blood chilled. Not Harper. She scribbled notes furiously. Clara had sensed another presence even before the storm, before Elden's story, before the ranger's report. The lantern man wasn't a ghost from Elden's guilty conscience. He was there, circling, intruding, silent and unseen. 2 days later, Emma drove out to Willow Fork, where the ranger had spotted him. The forest felt older here, the pines denser, the undergrowth tangled and stubborn. The path wound along the creek, rocks slick with moss. She walked slowly, recording her impressions. This is where he vanished into the woods. No one searched further, no follow-up. He simply disappeared. The afternoon light dimmed as clouds gathered, the air turning damp and metallic. Emma paused, breath fogging in the chill. That was when she saw it. A shard of yellow glass half buried in the mud, glinting faintly in the fading light. Her pulse spiked. She crouched, lifting it carefully. The edges were jagged, weathered by decades, but unmistakable. Lantern glass. The wind stirred the branches above, whispering like voices too faint to decipher. Emma's skin prickled. She slipped the shard into her pocket, fighting the urge to run. When she returned to the car, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. That evening, Boon met her at a diner, sliding into the booth across from her. He eyed the glass she placed on the table. "Found this by Willow Fork," she said quietly. Boon leaned close, studying it. So he was there. Elden wasn't lying. Emma nodded slowly. But why would Harper end up with the lantern later? Unless he killed the man, or unless they were working together. Boon's jaw tightened. If there was another man, he'd be in his 60s now. Maybe older. Might still be out there. Emma sipped her coffee, her voice low. And maybe watching us right now. Through the diner window, headlights flickered on the highway. A truck passed, then another. The glass shard glowed faintly under the neon sign, like a captive flame. Emma stared at it, heart pounding. The story was no longer about Harper alone. It was about a presence that had haunted the mountains long before she came looking. A man with a lantern, slipping through storms, watching, always watching. That night she dreamed of Clara. The girl stood in the snow, hair plastered to her face, pointing into the darkness. Behind her, a lantern swayed, its yellow light fractured by cracks, and a voice whispered through the storm. Still here, still waiting. Emma woke with a cry, her sheets damp with sweat. Outside, the motel sign buzzed faintly, but in the far corner of the parking lot, just for a moment, she thought she saw it again. A faint, flickering yellow glow. The motel lamp flickered as Emma spread documents across the bedspread. Boon had slipped her copies of Harper's old bank statements, the ones the sheriff's office had filed away and forgotten. The numbers told their own story. Modest deposits from guiding trips, steady withdrawals at diners and supply stores, until a sudden influx. $5,000 wired in cash, October 8, 1997. No sender identified. 4 days before the trek. Emma traced the digits with her pen. Who would pay Harper that kind of money? Eldon had said Harper owed him, not the other way round. Unless the payment wasn't from Eldon at all. She flipped to another sheet. Credit card charges from a hardware store in Boulder. Lantern fuel, rope, a hunting knife. Her throat tightened. Harper had stocked up before the trek. Supplies that didn't quite fit the image of a friendly mountain guide. The next morning she confronted Boon outside the station. "You had these files the whole time," she accused, waving the statements. Boon rubbed the back of his neck, shame creeping into his eyes. "I wasn't hiding them. Just, what good would it do? Harper's gone, the kids are gone. Stirring it up only hurts people." Emma's voice sharpened. "It does good because it shows he was preparing for something. That wire transfer, it was no accident. Somebody funded him." Boon leaned closer, lowering his voice. "And if you dig deep enough, you'll find out that somebody still has friends in this county." The kind that don't like questions. Emma held his gaze. Then they should have buried the lantern better. That afternoon, she drove to Eldon's farmhouse again. He met her on the porch, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. "You keep coming back like a ghost," he muttered. "Because you keep lying," she shot back. She thrust the statements toward him. "Harper got wired $5,000 before that trek. You say he owed you. Did you ever see that money?" Eldon's eyes widened, darting over the numbers. "No, never. Then who paid him?" His face tightened. "I don't know. But I'll tell you this. Harper was connected. He had friends in places he shouldn't. Men who liked to hunt things that weren't deer." Emma's pulse jumped. "What do you mean?" Eldon's voice dropped. "You think the lantern man was some stranger?" "Number. He was one of them. A customer. Harper lured people into the mountains, and sometimes they didn't come back. I was supposed to keep quiet, take the cash when it came, but after that storm, after Clara and Daniel, I couldn't stomach it anymore." Emma's stomach turned. "You're saying it wasn't just him?" "It was organized." Eldon's silence was answer enough. Back in her motel, Emma opened Clara's diary again, reading the entries with new horror. October 10th. Harper keeps watching me. October 11th. Strange noise outside tent. October 12th. Someone else. Not Harper this time. A customer. The man with the lantern. Her recorder clicked on. Elden Graves claims Harper worked with others. That clients were selected. Sometimes delivered. Clara's entries suggest a second presence even before the storm. Harper was not acting alone. She paused, breath shaky. If this is true, then Daniel and Clara weren't victims of weather or chance. They were chosen, Boon called that evening, his voice rough with unease. "Emma, you need to leave this alone. I don't know what you told Eldon, but he's rattled. He called me, swore he saw a truck outside his place last night, headlights sitting in the dark. When he stepped out, it drove off." Emma's pulse quickened. "What kind of truck?" "Old Chevy. Green. Matches a vehicle Harper used to borrow from a man in town. The lantern man?" Boon's silence stretched. "Could be. Or just another ghost. Either way, it means someone's watching again." Emma looked toward the motel curtains. The parking lot was empty, but her skin prickled as if unseen eyes lingered. 2 nights later, she returned to Willow Fork alone. The creek gurgled faintly under the moonlight. She followed the path deeper than before, recorder in one hand, flashlight in the other. October 1997, she whispered into the mic. A ranger spots a man with a cracked yellow lantern near this point. He retreats into the woods. Never identified, the forest pressed close, branches clawing at the beam of her light. Then, a rustle. Leaves shifting where no wind blew. Emma froze, heart hammering. A glow flickered between the trees. Dim, unsteady yellow. She raised the flashlight, trembling. The glow blinked out. Silence. Emma stumbled backward, breath ragged. She turned and ran, crashing through underbrush until the car appeared ahead. She slammed the door, locked it, sat shaking with her hands on the wheel. In the rearview mirror, for just an instant, the faint glow returned at the tree line. Watching. Back at the motel, she recorded in a whisper, as though someone might overhear through the walls. The Lantern Man is not a story. He's here, still here. Whoever he was, whoever he is, he never left these mountains, and if Harper was working for him or with him, then maybe the real storm has only just started. She clicked off the recorder, the silence in the room thick as snow. Somewhere outside, in the darkness beyond the parking lot, a glow flickered once, then vanished. The storm came sudden, the kind the mountains brewed in minutes. Emma's windshield wipers fought against sheets of rain as she sped toward Elden's farmhouse. Boon's call still echoed in her ears. Elden's gone. Truck missing. Door left wide open. And Emma, he left your name scrawled on the table. The road narrowed, pines looming dark on either side. Emma's stomach twisted. She kept replaying the words Elden had whispered last time. If you tell anyone, he'll know. The man with the lantern. If he's still alive, he'll come for you too. Lightning split the sky as she pulled into the drive. The farmhouse door swung on its hinges, groaning in the wind. Inside, the kitchen light flickered, casting shadows across the table. A note sat there, scrawled in shaky letters. Meet at Willow Fork. Midnight. Bring no one. Truth comes with a storm. Emma's breath quickened. She glanced around the empty house. No Elden, no truck. Just that invitation, or trap. By the time she reached Willow Fork, the rain had thinned to mist, the forest glistening under the half-moon. She parked, heart pounding, and stepped into the woods with only her flashlight and recorder. The creek's murmur guided her. Branches dripped cold water down her neck. Her boots sank into mud. Then, voices, low, tense, cutting through the dark. She switched off the flashlight, crouching behind a boulder. Ahead, in a clearing, two figures stood. Elden's wiry frame, shoulders hunched. Opposite him, Boon. Emma's chest seized. Boon's gun glinted faintly in the moonlight. You brought her here, Boon growled. I told you to keep your mouth shut. Elden's voice cracked. She deserved the truth. They all did. Harper wasn't the monster. You were. Emma clamped a hand over her mouth, blood roaring in her ears. Boon stepped closer, rain dripping off his hat brim. I buried that case for a reason. People don't understand. Harper didn't lure those kids out there for fun. He was told to, paid to. My job was to keep the county clean, keep questions quiet, and you... He jabbed the gun toward Elden. You were supposed to take the money and stay gone. Elden shook his head violently. Not anymore. I see him still. The Lantern Man. He's watching again. You can't stop him. Boon's jaw clenched. There is no Lantern Man. Just debts, just shadows. You spin stories to ease your guilt. Emma's pulse hammered. She wanted to rush forward, scream the truth from Clara's diary, from the ranger's report, from the shard of glass in her pocket. But the gun froze her. And then the forest answered for her. A glow bloomed at the tree line. Faint, fractured, yellow. All three froze. Boon swung the gun toward it, his voice breaking. Who's there? The lantern swayed slowly, casting broken shards of light across the clearing. A figure stood behind it, tall, shoulders hunched, face lost in shadow. Elden fell to his knees. It's him. After all these years, Boon cursed, firing once, twice. The shots cracked through the forest. The lantern flickered, staggered, and then steadied, glowing stronger. Emma's breath caught. The figure didn't fall, didn't flinch, just kept coming. Boon's hand shook violently as he aimed again, but before he could fire, Elden lunged, grabbing the barrel. The shot went wide, tearing into the dark. Boon struck him across the face, but Elden clung on, shouting, "Run, Emma!" She bolted from her hiding spot, flashlight beams slashing through branches. Behind her shouts, another gunshot, the crash of bodies grappling. And through it all, the lantern's glow, steady, patient, closing in. She didn't stop until she reached the car, chest heaving. She fumbled with the keys, hands slick with rain, finally wrenching the door open. The engine roared to life, headlights piercing the dark. For a moment, she dared to believe she could drive away, leave the storm behind. Then a shape moved at the edge of the beam. The lantern swung forward, light fractured by cracks, illuminating a face weathered and pale. A man, older now, hair stringy, eyes like hollow wells. Emma froze, knuckles white on the wheel. The lantern lifted, casting its glow across her windshield. The man smiled faintly. Lips cracked. Then he turned, disappearing back into the forest. The light bobbed once, twice, and was gone. Emma's heart thundered. She floored the accelerator, tires spitting gravel as she tore down the road. By dawn, the rain had passed. Boon's cruiser sat abandoned at Willow Fork. Elden's truck too, but no bodies were found. No gun, no lantern. Search teams combed the woods for days, finding only trampled mud, shell casings, and one last shard of yellow glass near the creek. Emma gave her statement, but the sheriff dismissed it as hysteria, storm-frayed nerves. Boon was listed missing, presumed dead. Elden, too. The case closed again, swallowed by silence. But Emma knew what she'd seen. The lantern wasn't a story or a hallucination. It was real, flickering through the trees, carrying secrets that refused to die. And somewhere, the man who carried it was still walking, still watching. That night in her motel, Emma packed her things. She slid Clara's diary into her bag, alongside the shard of glass. She pressed the recorder's button one final time. The storm is over. But the truth hasn't ended. Harper vanished. Boon vanished. Elden vanished. And yet the lantern remains. Maybe it always will. A cracked glass flame wandering these mountains, carrying with it the names of the lost. She paused, voice trembling. If you're listening to this, don't follow it. Don't chase the light. Some storms were never meant to be survived. She clicked it off. The silence absolute. Outside, the motel sign buzzed faintly, and across the parking lot just for a moment, a dim yellow glow shimmered, then faded into the night. 6 months later, the snow was gone from the lower valleys, the mountainsides streaked with green. Spring tourists filled Estes Park again, lining up for saltwater taffy and souvenir shirts. For them, the storm of October was just another piece of mountain weather already forgotten. But not for Emma. She sat in the small studio of Mountain Times, headphones snug, microphone glowing red. The producers had insisted on a podcast series, 12 episodes, one for each chapter of the investigation. They called it The Guide Who Never Came Back. Emma called it unfinished business. Her voice was steady as she read the closing script. We began with a camera recovered after 25 years in the snow. We followed the trail through Harper's evasions, Elden's confessions, Boon's warnings, and we ended in a storm at Willow Fork, where all three vanished into the dark. Officially, the case remains unsolved. But the evidence we uncovered, the diary, the bank records, the lantern glass, suggests the truth is stranger and darker than any police file will admit. She paused, letting the silence settle, then leaned closer to the mic. Some believe the man with the lantern is just a story, a ghost born of storms and grief. But I saw him. He walked into the clearing that night, and Boon, Elden, even Harper's shadow. All of them broke around that glow. I can't tell you who he was. I can't tell you why he was there. But I can tell you this. The lantern is still burning. She clicked the mic off. The red light died. That evening she drove alone into the foothills, windows down, air warm with the scent of pine. The podcast had gone live only hours earlier, and already her phone buzzed with notifications. Messages from listeners, families of the missing, hunters with their own stories of strange lights. But she wasn't chasing clicks tonight. She was chasing quiet. She parked at a turnout above the valley, the peaks painted gold by sunset. For a while she just sat, breathing. Clara's diary lay on the passenger seat, open to the last page. Emma traced the words with her finger. Maybe the mountain is trying to warn me. Her chest tightened. Clara's voice had never left her. It lingered like a whisper in wind, like the ache of something unfinished. Emma pulled the shard of lantern glass from her pocket. It caught the dying light, fractured it into thin lines, yellow, faint, like memory itself. She thought of Harper, his trembling hands, his whispered "I cut the rope," of Elden, half culprit, half victim, dragged down by debts, of Boon, old authority, protecting silence with a badge, and of the man with the lantern, nameless, faceless, still walking. The mountain had swallowed them all, but the lantern, it endured. Weeks later, Emma hiked alone up a trail above Bear Lake. Tourists bustled at the trailhead, but soon their voices faded, replaced by the hush of snowmelt streams. She climbed higher, into the stillness. At a bend in the path, she paused. A breeze stirred through the pines. For a moment, she thought she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Nothing, only shadows stretching long in the afternoon light. But then, far off among the trees, a faint flicker, yellow. Her breath caught. It shimmered once, twice, then vanished. Emma stood frozen, heart hammering, until the forest swallowed the silence again. She whispered into the recorder clipped to her pack, barely trusting her own voice. If you're out there, if you've been walking all these years, what are you carrying? What secret are you keeping? No answer came, only the wind. She walked on, the glow burned into her mind, knowing she would never truly stop following it. Back in town, tourists still bought postcards and taffy. Shopkeepers swept their porches. The world turned, forgetting. But in the high basin, where storms brewed fast and snow buried everything, a light moved among the pines, yellow, cracked, eternal. And those who saw it never forgot.